Hello anime lovers. The story begins with a girl who has just finished her favorite romance manga series, and since no further volumes are being made and the series got cancelled, she decides this is as good a time as any to go commit suicide. However, before she can knee herself into the afterlife, she gets called out to by this guy behind her. He tells her that what she's doing is dangerous. She believes this guy is trying to stop her from jumping to her death, so she pulls out a knife and threatens him to stay away from her because she needs to die. She also says that if he comes any closer, he will contract a deadly disease that will surely kill him. But as she is saying all this while pointing a knife at him, the guy just walks forward into the knife. The girl screams because she doesn't want to murder anyone before she dies, but the guy just grabs her and says, "Kids these days don't know how to do things anymore. If you're going to jump off a bridge, you've got to do a flip." He then lifts her by her face and plops her down on the other side of the bridge. For someone who just got stabbed, he seems to be acting very lively and asks what the deadly disease is going to be. Will it be like liquefying organs or spontaneous dismemberment? However, it was much worse than that. The guy falls onto a train and splats on the windshield. The girl sits there and cries because she has done it again and dragged someone down to their death because she took too long to end herself. However, as she is still crying, the dude's head comes rolling up to her and is somehow still alive. It tells her that he finally understands what she meant by deadly disease as he repairs his body and regenerates fully. However, the clothes do not come with a package, causing the girl to get scared and punch him in the nuts. Don't worry, those will grow back too. She runs away from him thinking he is a zombie, but he doesn't want to let her go and grabs her, saying he isn't a zombie but rather he is undead. He heard her mention that her disease was unlucky, so he wanted to ask a few questions about that. But soon after, the police begin to close in on the location due to reports of a dude going splat on a train. And right now he's a naked man carrying a screaming girl, so he needs to get out of here. He uses his blood as rocket boots and propels himself into the sky. Later, he explains how he was flying with his blood, and he tells her that he regenerated his legs at high speed and shot them out to use the momentum to fly. But she wasn't paying attention to his explanation because she was trying to escape. However, he didn't bring her up here just to let her go, so he dangles her by her legs and says he still has some questions to ask. She's afraid that her unluck will trigger again if he keeps touching her, but it's quite a long way down if he lets go. She says it's fine since she was planning on dying today anyway, but after a brief trip on the merry-go-round, she is too scared to continue and promises to tell him everything she knows about unluck. She explains that when she was 8, her parents were about to go on a business trip together. They said they'd be gone for a week, so she hugged them goodbye and gave them kisses. However, an hour later, the plane went boom. From that day, anyone who came in direct contact with her skin got hurt in some way or another. So, she began dressing to cover up as much as possible. After saying this, the guy takes the opportunity to slip his hand under her shirt for some direct boob skin contact, while still butt naked, to test out the unlucky effects. Sure enough, somehow a plane with a load of bananas fell right on top of the guy. The girl takes the opportunity to escape, while the guy is still regenerating, but she slips on a banana and goes off the edge of the building. As she falls, she is in disbelief that her life is going to end because of a banana. She can't get to do anything fun or interesting, never fell in love, and No Game No Life finally got a second season. She can't die yet. Luckily, the guy doesn't plan on letting her die so easily and flies down with his meat propulsion, sticking a bone in the wall to slow their fall. The guy tells her that he won't be letting her go so easily since he has finally found someone who might be able to put an end to his absurdly long life. If he can figure out what makes her unluck tick, he might be able to use it to create the biggest stroke of unluck she has ever seen and maybe actually kill him for good. So now, he plans to take her to his hideout to find a way to end himself. Meanwhile, some people in suits are watching him fly off and have been given the order to apprehend the girl after they have confirmed her abilities. Back at the hideout, they haven't introduced themselves to each other yet, but the guy is Andy and the girl is Fuko. Andy has already tested out the change in effect with duration of contact, so now he wants to move on to the surface area and asks her to take off all her clothes for maximum surface area. Unsurprisingly, she runs off. She can handle him touching her to kill himself, but she is not mentally prepared to strip naked for him. He chases her and tells her that this is only because she hasn't fully explained the ability to him, but she just doesn't want to tell him. While running, she gets her jacket caught on a hook, and it comes off, revealing that she has that Rapunzel kind of hair. He can't help it since anyone who tries to cut her hair would only end up dying because of her. Hearing this, Andy grabs her chin, pulls out a hairdresser bag, and begins to cut her hair. She's worried since unluck will activate as soon as he lets go of her, but he says he'll be fine. She asks him if he used to be a hairstylist, and he says he was one ages ago. He finishes off her haircut, and she is really happy with it. But now that the haircut is done and he has been holding her for 15 minutes, something big must be coming. A few seconds later, Andy's head is chopped off, but not because of any natural disaster, but rather because of the soup guys. They came to apprehend Fuko and were prepared with a capsule to keep Andy from regenerating. Fuko was about to tell him to leave her because she believed they came here to rescue her, but she couldn't be more wrong. They're just here to capture them for themselves. They are an organization that is meant to keep the people with strange powers like Andy and Fuko in check, and Fuko was high on their priorities list. Her power sucks the luck out of anyone that touches her. However, a layer of clothes seems to prevent that effect. Her powers are certainly dangerous, and what's worse is that they have no other applications aside from killing people, which is what they believe Andy was trying to do. However, Fuko corrects them and says the only person Andy wanted to kill was himself. The leader of the group gets agitated and tells her to shut up, or he might just kill her anyway since her power is already really dangerous. But she continues to speak and thanks Andy for actually touching her without fear, and being relatively kind to her. Just then, the unluck from Andy touching her from before kicks in and strikes where his head is, and also the guy that was holding the capsule. They fall into a hole, and Andy is now free to regenerate his body and do as he pleases once more. The leader tells the others not to panic. Even if they can't kill him outright, they can still cut him up into tiny pieces and possibly reseal him again. After all, he is still only an amateur when it comes to fighting. However, that is where they are wrong. Sure, right now Andy is only an amateur, but that is only because he gave himself brain damage to repress some memories to save on disk space. However, if he simply regenerates that part of his brain, then 100 years of fighting experience comes rushing back to him. And with all that experience and an immortal body, no one could ever dream of winning a fight against him. Though the soup cronies were able to do some considerable damage to Andy, he easily slashed and killed them. After that, he blocks all the memories again because his brain is starting to lag from overload. The soup man realizes that Andy would surpass him in all aspects if he tried to confront him. So he switches to some more underhanded measures and threatens to kill Fuko if Andy doesn't cut off his head and toss it over without regenerating at all. Andy is disappointed that he doesn't get to fight the guy anymore, but if Fuko's life is on the line, then he is going to comply with the ultimatum. Fuko tells him to give up on her and just take care of himself. It's better if she dies anyway since she has hurt so many people with her powers. But Andy doesn't give a damn about her opinion. He decides to save her life, and that's what he's going to do, even if it ends up with him in some underground laboratory. Fuko is touched that he would be willing to risk his freedom for her despite only having known her for a total of 2 hours. So she decides to give Andy what he wants. She knows how to trigger the worst outcome of unluck, and to do that, she breaks out of her captor's grasp and jumps in the air to kiss Andy's head as it falls to the ground. Andy realizes what she just did, so he holds the soup guy in place and tells Fuko to get the hell out of there quickly, as he waits for what is about to come with a huge smile on his face. A freaking meteorite falls from the sky and right onto the building, blowing it up along with Andy and the soup guy. Safe to say that Andy's hideout has been destroyed, and Fuko sits there upset that Andy might be gone for good this time. However, he walks out of the building missing a few teeth and a sword in his chest, and thanks her for the help back there. She finally introduces herself as Fuko and asks him for his name, but he doesn't remember since that was part of the repressed memories. Since she can't have him going around without a name, Fuko comes up with Andy for him as a name, and he is fine with it. Andy comments on how one kiss caused so much damage to him. He says it'll probably do a lot more if they smashed, and hearing that, Fuko is back to running again. Fuko had always felt like she deserved to die after all the death and destruction her ability had caused over the years. But after meeting Andy, she felt that she had finally found someone whom she could hang around without having to worry about accidentally killing him. But right now, she's starting to regret hanging around him. Andy has her backed against a wall, with his meat still hanging out of mind, and once again asks to smash because that will likely cause unluck to trigger in the most spectacular manner imaginable. But his theory fails to take Fuko's feelings into account, and she is left racking her brain to figure out something to say before Andy is done with his stretches. Before Andy can go balls deep, Fuko blurts out that unluck is based on likability, meaning the more she likes the person, the worse the unluck is going to be. Aside from Andy and her parents, Fuko has also kissed her grandfather, whom she was really scared of, and all he got as a result was a broken ankle. He did end up dying 3 years later, but that was too much time for it to have been related to her unluck. So, that proves that the more she likes the person, the worse the unluck is going to be. And with that being the case, if Andy tries to smash her right here and now, she's going to hate him forever, and he'll only get mediocre deaths from it. That made sense to Andy, and the new information caused a change to his original plans. So, he says he can't let her die for a while and asks her to follow him. Fuko follows him, and she gets taken to an armory, which Andy just has with all the time that he has been alive. He has had enough time to build bases all across the world for whatever he needs. This way, he can deal with those soup guys if they ever come after him. Now that they are here, Andy gets down to business and has Fuko suited up with armor against basically all forms of attacks imaginable. This is a countermeasure in case those soup guys go after her again, and after the failed attack yesterday, they will come again. Fuko thinks they might have been scared off by the literal meteor falling from the sky yesterday. And while that may be true for normal people, it doesn't apply to them because they have teams of people who can defy the rules of the world, like Fuko and Andy, negators. After the fight, they now know exactly what their abilities can do, while Andy and Fuko are still left in the dark about what they are going to have to face. So, they are at a serious disadvantage. 50 years ago, the negators caught Andy and did quite a number on him, having him spend 10 years in some lab while they dissected him over and over. Fuko is shocked by Andy being over 50 and asks how old he is, but Andy interjects and asks what she thinks they will do after they have captured her or how many people will die. While they try to figure out the rules of unluck, they might cut off her fingers to see if the unluck still works with severed body parts or even forcibly smash in different positions to see what happens. They are much worse than Andy, so she has to rely on him to protect her from them. And thus, they go on a road trip together. Fuko asks Andy if there is anywhere in particular that they are heading to, but he says they are just going where the road takes them. Or in short, running forever or until they run out of gas. Fuko is worried because that just means they will eventually get caught when they can't run away anymore. So, she starts to think Andy would be better off if he just left her behind because he'll be stuck in a lab again if he gets caught. However, Andy has no intention of leaving her behind before she falls in love with him and can get him killed with unluck. Fuko appreciates him protecting her, but she says she won't be falling in love with him. However, Andy is sure it will eventually happen. While Fuko is still arguing with him, Andy notices a crack forming in the sky and realizes that the organization has arrived. 50 years ago, the ones who caught him shot out from one of those warp gates. So, he tells Fuko to die stuck as the Union busts through. A giant robot smashes Andy into the ground and tosses Fuko into a nearby wall with all the force that it uses. But she is mostly unharmed, thanks to all the protective gear that she has on. However, I can't see the same for Andy. Fuko tries to run to Andy's side, but gets pulled back by some unknown force and finds herself stuck to this guy. She looks up at him and realizes he is one of the enemies, so she tries to get away from him in a scene that can easily be taken out of context. The guy tells the robot that he has managed to capture Fuko, so the robot tells him to kill her like they were instructed to, while he captures Andy. However, the blue-haired dude doesn't want to kill Fuko yet because she is so cute. Meanwhile, Andy escapes the robot's fist and is about to strike him down with his sword. But he suddenly stops moving altogether. Fuko thinks the guy holding her captive is the cause of Andy's sudden loss of movement. But as Andy is punched backward, he regains his movement and realizes that both of these guys have external restraining type abilities. The big guy paralyzes a person's body, and the blue-haired guy can take control of your body. Though Andy doesn't know exactly what they are negating to pull it off. The blue-haired guy praises him for figuring out that much of their abilities in an instant, but says knowing that isn't going to change much for him. Andy walks up to the robot and gets punched in the face, but after the punch, he can move again and returns the punch to the robot. This is how he will fight the ability. He will get hit and then hit back once his movement returns to him. The blue-haired guy thinks that is quite the crazy way of fighting, especially since Andy can still feel all the pain from getting hit. Fuko asks the blue-haired guy, whose name is Shen, if they are doomed to get hunted down by the Union forever, and Shen tells her that, sadly, it's true, especially since after that meteor strikes, her danger level rose from a 5 to an 8 out of 10. So no matter where she and Andy go, they will always have someone coming after them. But that is still assuming that they can manage to escape them here. If that is the case, then Fuko asks why he and the robot aren't being hunted, and he explains that they are special cases because they are part of the 10 members of a special team in the Union. Once you become a part of this team, you are exempt from all pursuits under the condition that you commit yourself to carry out missions that are assigned to you. However, there are still some tests that need to be done before one can join the team. However, as the robot is about to kill Fuko, He tells her that there are no open spots in the team, and as long as there are no vacancies, there will be no new additions to the team. But just before she can be crushed under his fist, Andy speeds through to save her and says it's a great idea to join the union since they won't be hunted down afterward. And if it only accepts new members when there are vacancies in the team, it just needs to get rid of these two to make some space. Once they join the team, he doesn't know what they will have them do. But he is sure of one thing: as long as Fuko is with him, he is not going to let her die, nor is he going to hand her over to anyone, making her blush and possibly start falling for him. She takes off her glove and touches Andy before running away. However, before she leaves, she turns around to tell Andy that the unluck is probably going to be massive, but it's not because she's in love with him or anything. Baka, she continues speaking as Andy backs up closer to the two, and then a giant truck comes barreling towards them, and they are all engulfed in flames. Andy flies out and regenerates his body, but the other two also emerge unscathed from the inferno. Since that didn't work, Andy moves on to his next plan of action and has to figure out exactly what their powers are as he escapes into a building. From what he has been able to see thus far, the big guy negates all of Andy's movements once he gets into battle stance. His power is likely unavoidable, but Andy doesn't have any information on Shen, so he thinks it will be best to wait until he has figured out his ability. But after that long-fought process, he realizes that there are several sticks of dynamite beeping as a countdown reaches 0. The building collapses, and Fuko is left wondering if this was part of her unluck or if it was just a coincidence. In the rubble, the big guy gets up and grumbles about how he would have been dead if it weren't for his suit that protected him. He wants to hurry up and get the mission over with, so he scans around and finds Andy's hand in the rubble. However, it is a trap, and Andy appears behind him, using his finger as a gun, and shoots him in the head, and eliminates him permanently. Shen finally finds Andy and sees that his teammate is dead, but Andy still wants to fight, even though he has already secured himself a seat at the table because he still needs to get one for Fuko. Fuko also arrives later and finds Andy fighting with Shen, but every blow Andy hits is blocked perfectly. Andy notices that Fuko is holding his sword, so he asks her to toss it over to him so that he can use it to strike Shen down. However, before Andy can hit Shen, he suddenly stops dead in his tracks. Fuko thinks things are getting bad, so she tries to touch Shen to use her unluckily, but he dodges that as well. Shen tells them that his power affects their minds, so there is no way that they will be able to hit him or escape from him. But since his teammate is dead, there is a seat open at the table, so he asks which one of them will be joining. Andy says if that's what it has come to, then it will be Fuko who joins them, and he is fine with getting shipped off to some lab again. Fuko thinks it is ridiculous of him to give himself up so easily, but he says he'll find a way to break out eventually, and even if she's an old lady by then, he will find her before she dies. Shen thinks everything has been settled and asks Fuko to come with him, but she throws down her jacket and tells him to look away for 10 minutes. He isn't going to do that because that would undo his ability, but she says he has to, because she's about to Netflix and chill with Andy, minus the Netflix part. Thanks to her unluckily, she has never had any sort of romantic relationship, so now that someone is willing to risk their freedom for her sake, she feels that it's the least she can do to give him the best shot he has got at getting killed by unluck. And if that means they have to raw dog it right here on the pavement, then so be it. Shen finds this whole situation hilarious and gives them an option so they can stay together. If they can manage to kill one of the other members of the 10, then they will both be able to join. He tells them that in Russia, 3 days from now, there will be another one of them there to investigate one such occurrence negator. So if they can manage to kill that guy, then they're all set. But there will still be others coming after them in that time. With that, he takes his leave, and they have their next destination set. But neither of them has passports, so they'll be hitching rides along the way. Andy also finally asks Fuko how old she is, to which she answers 18, and he says great because that means she is allowed to drink over there. So after they're done, it'll be vodka party time. Meanwhile, there is a girl in a satellite space station who uses its cameras to look down on Earth and find a yacht with Andy and Fuko inside. Andy is enjoying the whole ride, as he got the yacht modified to make it go way faster than normal. And I can't say the same for Fuko. She's curled up under her seat because she is still afraid that other Union members will be hunting them the entire time they are on their way to Russia. However, Andy doesn't care about any of that. He didn't pull his boat out of storage, just so she could cower in fear under the chair. He pulls her out and tells her to have fun. That's an order. In the end, all of Fuko's cowering was for a good reason, as they are attacked by the Union members out at sea, and Andy is forced to take control of the wheel to dodge the incoming missile strikes. Fuko is sure that they are doomed since there is no way a boat can outrun a jet, but Andy doesn't seem too worried. In the worst case scenario, they can just use unluck to blast out of here with another natural disaster. She yells that it doesn't work like that, and unluck isn't some convenient attack. But Andy tells her that it's all about how you use your ability to your advantage. He grabs a live grenade and explains that his ability can be used for a lot more than just death prevention. In this case, if he partially cuts off his arm and then regenerates a new one in the same spot, he can fire it out of his hand with a grenade in it. The grenade hand blows up the jet, and Fuko thinks they are in the clear. But Andy reminds her that they still have to kill one member of the Union with the same gold emblem that Shen had, which is most likely the indicator that the person is part of the 10 negators of the Union. He has a good idea of who some of those negators are. For one, there is the person who made the indestructible katana that Andy has unbreakable. Another one is the crazy scientist who experimented on him after he was captured 50 years ago. And the person who captured him, the last girl, can create invisible barriers from nothing, which was how she was able to capture Andy in the first place. She caught his head in a barrier and left him with no space to regenerate. So it's going to be pretty bad if he has to face her. Still, he will face her regardless of the difficulty. If it comes down to it, he's not going to let anyone keep them from their goal. And he still has the option of activating unluck in the worst case scenario. Fuko still disagrees that unluck cannot be used in this way. But as another jet approaches, Andy says he's going to have to get a feel for the limits of unluck before they get into a really bad situation. Fuko hears this and realizes that it means Andy is going in for another round of touching her. Meanwhile, we see that girl from the space station looking down and talking to herself about how much she loves Andy. She fires down some of her invisible barriers to Earth and destroys the boat instantly. Andy finds himself in the water and wonders what could have attacked them. However, before he can worry about that, he has to think about Fuko and rescuing her from drowning. He finds her trapped under the wreckage and swims down towards her to save her before she dies. He wedges himself under the wreckage and uses the force of his quick regeneration to create enough space to pull her out. He starts swimming to the surface, but on the way notices something that gives him an idea. He gets Fuko to a floating piece of the boat and resuscitates her, before telling her to put her hands up as they are about to be caught. The jet shines a spotlight on them and asks if Andy intends to surrender. He says that he intends to do so, but he's just buying some time for his plan. He wants to use unluck to get out of this, and it will help them understand how it operates a little better. So far, every time unluck has occurred, it pulled things in from a great distance away, like the lightning bolt and meteorite. But what was so special about these times, you ask? They were both situations where the contact between Fuko and Andy was of great value to her, so it had to pull in something proportional to the resulting stroke of unluck. And this time, he has found something that should be proportional to the unluck. So that is what is likely going to happen. But hearing Andy mention this, she is confused, because she hasn't had Andy touch her yet. But that's when Andy tells her that he had to give her CPR since she had drowned and her double Ds were in the way, so he moved them. She is greatly embarrassed to find out that Andy saw and touched her, but then Andy tells her that even after the chest compressions, she still wasn't waking up, so he performed mouth-to-mouth on her. Fuko's embarrassment reaches a boiling point, and so does the volcano that they are currently sitting on top of, as it blasts them upwards and onto the jet. Now that he's within range, Andy switches over to Demon Slayer mode for a bit, and pulls off a sword strike that kills the pilot in the jet. But at the same time, he makes sure not to cut up the cockpit. So as the jet falls out of control, he climbs into the cockpit with Fuko and uses it to escape. With that, they now know that they just need to identify something that could be used by unluck and have a proportional amount of contact to trigger it. Thanks to that, they are still free and even got a new means of transportation out of it. With this, they can make it to Russia quickly, so they go full throttle. However, by morning, the jet initiates a self-destruct sequence since the people at Union have probably figured out that they stole the jet. Due to this, Andy and Fuko have to eject to avoid it, but are now falling through the sky. Andy is still smiling though, since he has a trick up his sleeve to land safely, or safely for Fuko at least. He lands on the ground, but breaks every single bone in his body in order and throws Fuko up to shield her from the impact. Then he just keeps running like nothing happened. Now that they've landed, he tells Fuko to keep her head down, because the negator could be here any minute now. But Fuko is too mesmerized by the beautiful landscape before her. This is the first time Fuko has ever been overseas since she became a recluse after discovering her unluck. so Andy tells her she can have some time to enjoy it if she wants. The union is more of a secret organization, so they likely won't try anything while the public is around. He tells her that he's going to go track down one of his old war buddies to see if they can help them if it comes down to it. Before he goes, Fuko asks Andy if the person who comes here to investigate is sane. Then maybe they could talk it out, but he says he'll just kill them. He still needs to get a spot on the 10 for himself, so anyone careless enough to be reasonable in a situation like this isn't going to be alive. On a side note, Andy asks Fuko if she has any food that she doesn't like, because an old friend of his has a restaurant that he wants to go to, so when he gets back, that is what they'll do. But until then, she should just have some fun for once. Unfortunately, Fuko doesn't know much about this fun thing that he is talking about, and she definitely can't interact with the locals since touching her would kill them. And she doesn't speak Russian. However, on the beach, she bumps into a girl painting, and it turns out to be the spaceship girl with the force fields. However, Fuko doesn't know that. She doesn't seem to recognize Fuko but can tell that she is from Japan, which she loves. The girl points out that she is wearing a uniform that looks very similar to a Japanese school uniform, but Fuko wouldn't know about that since she never went to high school. She notices the girl's painting and comments on how pretty it is, prompting the girl to pull out another canvas and ask Fuko to paint with her. While Fuko has painted before, she doesn't consider herself a good painter, so she is going to decline the offer. But then she remembers Andy telling her to have fun, and this would probably be fun. The two spend the evening painting, and the girl strikes up a conversation, asking Fuko if she likes things that change or things that stay the same. She loves things that stay the same and aren't swayed by the things around them, which is why she loves art so much. Fuko doesn't know how to answer a question like that, so she takes a little time to think about it, and they keep painting together. By nightfall, Fuko is finally done with her painting and shows it to the girl, but she is confused by the bright lights that Fuko painted around the moon. We learn that in this world, stars don't exist at all, but Fuko thought the night sky would look better with more lights in the sky, so she added some. She also has an answer to the girl's question about change. Up until 4 days ago, she had been stuck the same way for years. But then she met this odd guy, and a whole lot of stuff happened, including some groping, kidnapping, explosions, near-death experiences, and more explosions. But through all that, Fuko was able to change herself for the better. With that in mind, she would have to say that she appreciates change. The girl doesn't agree with Fuko's answer, but says she understands what Fuko means. And as she does this, she walks out onto the lake and just stands on the water. She then pulls a big chunk of water out and has it levitating in the air, confusing and shocking Fuko. Andy then comes running out to the beach and tries to slash at the girl, but she's able to block it and pushes Andy back. As he falls, he calls her Gina and tells her she's going a little heavy on the makeup, before sticking his landing next to Fuko. Fuko asks who the girl is, and he explains that she is the one who captured him 50 years ago. This means that Gina is at least above 60 right now. She says she received a briefing on what is going on here and knows they came here to try and kill her so they can get her spot on the 10 seats. But if they want to try and kill her, she's not going to make it easy for them. Fuko gets on Andy's back as they prepare for battle. Instead of an attack, Gina goes in for a hug, but Andy isn't interested in embracing his opponent and draws his sword. Gina finds him mean for not wanting to reunite after 40 years and attacking her the first chance he gets. But before anything else can happen, Fuko asks if she is the same one who caught Andy 50 years ago, and after a brief pause, she confirms, saying she caught and supervised him while he was held captive by the Union. That doesn't make much sense to her since Gina looks to be the same age as her, but Andy chimes in and says she was 16 back then, so she's got to be at least 66, right? But you should never bring up the age of the 60-year-old high school girl. She uses her powers to cover up Andy's mouth, and with no other way to release her hold, he chops off part of his face. Then Gina gets bad and tries kissing Andy's dismembered lips, but he disintegrates it before a new kink tag can be created. Andy regenerates his face and tells Fuko he needs to figure out a counter to Gina's power. But seeing him so close to her, Gina yells at Fuko that she fell in love with Andy first. When they first met, it was with her as the hunter and him as the hunted. She succeeded in capturing him, but all the seats at the table were taken, so Andy was locked up in a cell. Back then, she went to see him and apologized for capturing him, since she was forced to follow orders. But Andy told her not to worry about it. He lost their fight, and he has nothing to hate her for. But he tells her that he will eventually break out, and when he does, he hopes to be able to have a rematch with her, and he'll make sure he doesn't lose a second time. and those words hit with a perfect combo to have her heart doing backflips for him. But 10 years later, he escaped from the cell without so much as saying a word to her, and then proceeded to go into hiding for the next 40 years. But after meeting Fuko, he changed his pattern and started going all over the place, leaving a clear trail that she could follow. While she was saying this, throw some grenades at her. Despite the blaze behind her, Gina remains unharmed and continues her speech, saying she had agreed to inform her first if he ever happened to find Andy. But then he went and challenged him. But some good came out of that, since the guy Shen came with was killed, which means there's a seat open at the table. And that's all she needs to make sure he keeps his freedom. Andy throws a flashbang, which temporarily blinds her, but despite being disoriented, she still doesn't drop the barrier around her. However, he is at least gathering some good intel on what kind of attacks work on her and what doesn't. Fuko asks about his war buddies who were supposed to help, but he says they are all dead, which makes sense cause they would all have been over 80 by now. But he tells her to relax, because he will figure out what it is that Jenna negates. To do that, he goes through Gina's brain analysis of everything he has seen her do up to this point. First, she solidified the lake, then she used some kind of telekinesis to make it float upward. And lastly, she created invisible barriers and stairs. If he assumes she can solidify stuff, then what is she solidifying to make her barriers? And if it were just some simple hardening, then he should still be able to cut through it with his sword. On the ground, Gina throws her hat towards them, and as it flies past, after destroying Andy's lower body, he sees something that gives him a good idea of what Gina's ability is. He lands. Gina says he's being held back since he has to protect Fuko, and that things would have been a lot simpler if Fuko had just died back on that boat. But Andy doesn't care about that since in his own words, whether it is fate or not, Fuko is his once again, hitting the word jackpot and flustering her. He's not going to let her die until he does so. Gina, a little jealous, is ready to charge and take Andy's head like last time, so she can have him by her side forever. Fuko thinks it's crazy for Andy to challenge her directly after she caught him 50 years ago, but he says he finally figured out what Jenna is negating, so he can beat her now. He puts a grenade in his mouth, making even Gina go, "Wait, what the hell?" and then chops off his head and flings it into the sky. The grenade explodes, covering the beach in Andy juice, and he says he is sure of it now, with his hair still on fire. He says she can negate the change in the physical form of matter, and she uses it to stop the change of air, creating those invisible barriers. Gina isn't too worried about Andy knowing her ability, since there isn't anything he can do against it with undead. And while Andy agrees, he has Fuko here, and he regenerates his body through her shirt, asking for her help. After 3 episodes of craziness, Fuko has resigned herself as the unluck generator and presses her Tig-old biddies firmly against Andy's back for some quality skin contact. Gina is all riled up, seeing Fuko's double D's all over her man, and is enraged because when it comes to her chest size, wait, what chest? She starts saying that Fuko must have seduced him with those airbags of hers, but in 20 years, they're bound to get saggy. However, Fuko declares her melons will be round and plump forever. Gina counters, saying she's the only one that can stay the same forever since her ability is unchanged. However, Andy is quick to point out that her ability is an external target. There are 2 types of abilities, those like Andy's undead, which only affects him, and those like Fuko's unluck, which only affects others. So, with how she has been using change, she is sure it can only affect external targets. She tries to claim she can use it on herself, since she still looks the same after 50 years, but that is just the wonder of makeup making her look the same. As for the chest again, what chest? And even the dummy thick wagon she is dragging has lost some of its suspension. He's pretty sure she can't use her power on any kind of organic material at all. Everything he just said is true, but that is part of the reason she's so angry about it, so she uses her power to slash at Andy. But he dodges and flies off. Andy tells her there's no need to be upset about it, because he likes old lady ass and prefers it like that. But she is still angry. Andy is now able to dodge or attack, since he can see the air hands coming towards him. So that is one problem solved, but he still hasn't figured out how he'll be able to take down the barrier around her. Fuko speaks up because she noticed something, so Andy turns his body around still inside her shirt, and asks her what she saw. She says Gina is angry at Andy, and has a barrier around her for protection, so she's only walking toward them instead of running. And that seems odd. Andy realizes something and tells Fuko she did a great job, noticing while his face is buried in her oppai. He has now figured out how to get to her, so he just needs to find the seed of unluck that could be generated to use it to his advantage. However, as he is flying up, he BNKs his head on something in the sky and falls to the solid lake. The lasers then shoot out, hitting Andy in the balls, but he's fine regardless. Gina reminds them that she was here investigating a Uma that is supposed to be hiding out in the area, so she was using her ability to split the island into chunks to find it. She was only doing this because she had a quota to meet, but since Fuko and Andy are here, she doesn't need to worry about filling that quota anymore. So she plans to end things now. She wants to be the same as she was back then and to be with the one she loves forever, so no matter how many people she has to hurt, she stays in the organization so she can keep chasing after Andy. Andy can block the incoming blow and hold her off with his sword, saying that if anyone is going to die, then it is going to be him. But Gina tells him there is no way that Fuko would ever be able to handle the heartless tasks that the Union would assign to her, even if she managed to join. Andy notices something about Gina's barrier in the meantime, and finally has his plan all figured out. There is a small hole in the bottom of the barrier, which he uses to walk around, but it's so small that he would only be able to fit his head in there. To use the unlock that Fuko's chest has been charging up on him. But even if he did manage that, Gina would kick him out immediately. So he comes up with a strategy and dives underwater before resurfacing, and using his blood to cover the barrier and prevent Gina from seeing what they are up to. They then stick the sword under her barrier and flip it over, exposing the hole. As the chance presents itself, Fuko throws Andy's head inside. Gina doesn't have the chance to react, and since Andy is inside the barrier, it will likely be something that is light-based, since the only thing capable of breaking through are light particles, and in this case, that means a death laser from the ship. The beam blows a hole straight through a mountain, and as Fuko watches on, the lake that had been solidified suddenly returns to liquid, meaning Gina's powers have been released. On the shore by the mountains, Andy sits next to a severely wounded Gina and gets on top of her, preparing to finish her off with one of his finger bullets. But Fuko runs up to stop him. He doesn't shoot Gina, but he tells Fuko that she doesn't have much time left to live. She was at the beck and call of the Union and has executed so many people for them, and yet nothing in the world has changed. She thought their mission was to save the world. Maybe she was wrong. She tells them to leave because her anti-aging is wearing off and she doesn't want to be seen like this. But Andy pulls her close for a kiss and tells her a few wrinkles aren't going to make her any less beautiful. Moments later, she dies peacefully. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.